What is your perspective on Ukraine and Russia,
So,
Dr. Dominick D'Anna?
is this being recorded?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my perspective is, when I do the stage 2 consciousness exercises that Corey has on his website, YouTube channel, it dissolves that tribalism perspective and allows you to see things from a non-polarizing view. In other words, more of the oneness, and dissolves that socialize us against you. This side of the tracks, this color or this nation or whatever, and you see it more from a bigger picture, a broader perspective. And I immediately flashed into this remembrance of how the media was demonizing those Somali pirates, those, tribal, lowbrow bastards taking people hostage, demanding millions of dollars, taking those oil tankers and those freighter ships and all the havoc that they created for us, and messing with the profit margins and all that stuff. And I saw, and there's even a video on YouTube where this Russian warship, the Somali pirates are going towards, and they just shoot this thing up and they blow it up, and they zoom in on the thing blowing up, and the holes in it, and it's sinking and it catches on fire, and this whole, it's demonizing the Somali pirates. And then not too long ago, I saw this video. So after I had that perspective, I saw this video of someone who went into the Somali people that do this type of stuff and interview them. And what's going on with you? Why are you guys doing this? And why is this, why do you think it's okay? And why, to get their perspective, their side of the story. And I don't remember exactly what word for word, but the gist I got out of is, these people were desperate. They said, our livelihood has been completely demolished. It's gone. We had so much of our food supply, so much of our resources, so much of our money that comes into our country and feeds our families and takes care of our people was from the fishing industry. And their fishing industry was wiped out because of all these foreign fishing vessels come in, China and many others, that fish the hell out of the waters around their country. So now their fishermen go out, and normally they'd have a huge load of fish that they could feed their families, sell the rest, bring in money to their economy. That industry is gone because it's just been decimated by how their seas have just been fished out, right?
Yeah.
And then the guy talks about how we don't have this, we don't have basic needs, we don't have food, we don't have anything. So we didn't have any. What the hell are we going to do? So we see these oil tankers come by our coast. So we're like, hey, desperate times call for desperate measures. And I was like, wow. So they interviewed the people and they showed the people how they're hungry, and they don't have all these basic things that they used to have before, and their livelihoods were taken away. And then I went from polarizing them, thinking these people are low-browed bastards and what they're doing is they're thieves, to shit, we put them in that desperate situation. So on some level, we're responsible. So instead of polarizing them, maybe we should take a look at what's their motivation. Why are they desperate enough to do this? And I think that when you understand what's happening from multiple perspectives, not only are you less likely to demonize them, but it's easier to have compassion. And even more important, maybe it's brings us to a viable solution. Help these people out in some way to restore them supporting themselves, and then they won't be stealing people's shit.
They need a stable money supply. You need an economy where capital is floating around and they can go and work and get jobs, earn money to buy the things they
Whatever it is. If they could feed their family and take care of their kids.
We're starting to see that in different places in Africa where
crypto,
people are using their phones and using crypto because the government's currency is kind of worthless.
Yeah.
And so the economy is starting to blossom in areas because there's plenty of money in the economy and they're buying and selling amongst each other with digital currencies.
Yeah.
So taking that perspective, if we're willing, let's put that onto what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. Why So let's make an assumption that Putin is not a dumb guy. Let's make the assumption that he was maybe a former KGB.
He ran the KGB, right?
Yeah, I'm being
No, he was an agent. He didn't run it. He didn't run it.
Oh,
I thought he became head of it at one point.
So he's a smart guy. He has martial arts background, right? He
likes to ride horses without his shirt on and have pictures taken.
Yeah, if you're gonna do that, you got to trim a little bit. You know, you want to work out a little bit. Anyway, you do whatever he wants. But the point is how can we look at what's going on from the Ukrainian perspective, from an outside perspective, which we already have, and then maybe from a Russian perspective, and how can we see why the hell would Putin put himself in a situation where he's going to create more of an issue with the U.S., which I don't think he wants, and with other countries, and why would he be sending troops in, and why would he be bombing this place? Like, what would possibly be his motivation to stir the pot where he doesn't really seem to... I just find it hard to believe, to buy the narrative that's being pushed on.
He wasn't happy about the breakup of the Soviet Union, and he's made it pretty clear that if he could, he would like to have all those countries back under the umbrella. And part of the, I was reading an article, I don't remember where it was, who it was the other day that had written it, but they were talking about back when the Soviet Union collapsed, NATO was basically 2,000 miles away from Moscow.
Yeah.
And now all those countries that used to be under the umbrella of the Soviet Union, Poland, Romania, a lot of these different countries that have since they're part of NATO. And so now NATO and NATO military assets and allies, people with the same ideology, are now 250 miles from Moscow. So you could, if you were to try to walk in his shoes and see through his eyes and see what he sees and feel what he feels, he would have to look at, I'm being slowly encircled here by my adversaries. And if you can just look at, they talk about trying to get the North Koreans to give up their nuclear weapons. It's like, or the Iranians for that matter, or the Pakistanis. Why would they? I feel like you just look at what the elite in the West are doing and have done with the war on terror, going back to even Vietnam. It's just, and especially over the last 20 years, how we've gone in, we just knock regimes over and wreck countries because of, it's the elite that are driving this. And so if you have a different set of values, you have a different moral perspective, is you could understand how he feels like he's being backed into a corner. And it's like, if we don't stand up, eventually, Russia will be dissolved into some other, what you call it, global order, if you will, the kind of stuff that Klaus Schwab wants. So it's like the Western elites are slowly moving to take over the elites of Russia, the different families.
Conform or else.
Like Abramoff, the one that owns the Chelsea, the football club, he just flew back to Moscow.
Yeah, so Putin is like the only leader I can think of off the top of my head of one of these more developed countries that is very resistant to the central bank controlling the economy of the country, right? So like every major country in the world, there's a central bank that's actually in charge of printing money and controlling interest rates, right? And Putin has strongly resisted that. Like he's looking out for Russia, and like as these Western influences start pushing out more and more, a lot of things that really like weaken the country also start taking over. And you like one of his, it's on there. I don't know if people can see it, but like one of Putin's conditions is that like Ukraine can't join NATO, right? Because as soon as Ukraine joins NATO, now you have a NATO affiliated country. It's right on the border of Russia, and they can start, state like strategically like moving troops in there, and then, like it's like.
And it would be similar, as we mentioned earlier, to Russia putting nuclear warheads in Mexico, which is right on the border of the U.S. The U.S. wouldn't tolerate that for a second.
Like we didn't tolerate in Cuba, the Cuban
So
Missile
why
Crisis.
would Russia
so like
tolerate
right now,
it if we're having someone who's connected with NATO, which means that the U.S.
because
we've been training and equipping the Ukrainian military for decades now.
Yeah, and like that's cool of us, right? But like you look at it from their perspective, right? And like right now, Putin's getting canceled, right? So it's the easy thing to do is just to jump on him. This guy he's the tyrant that's going to bring us into World War III and everything. But like when you're treating, like if you're treating the symptom of a sickness, that's short-sighted. What's the cause, right? And there's very little focus on.
Well, weakness invites aggression as well, and when you have somebody like, Biden as president, he's a gambler. He thinks this is a better, because I think there was a poll that just came out. It was like 60-something% of Americans were like, if Trump was still president, Putin would have never done this. And because people obviously can tell. The dude's he's in severe mental decline. That's the bottom line. And if you're gonna come after the Ukrainians or take a part of it, or kind of like what he did in Crimea. This is, and same thing with the Chinese and taking Taiwan. If they're gonna, I know they would prefer to take it kind of the way they did Hong Kong. And the way that they hope to conquer, the West, the United States, and destroy our country by ideological subversion and buying off the elite. One of the things we wanted to talk about was elite capture. All the business deals. Hell, Joe Biden's son doing business deals with the Chinese.
He's an artist. I don't know what you're talking about. Have you seen his stuff? Let me tell you,
my
my
con artist.
he's
a con artist.
I think my 4-month-old can give him a run for his artistic talent.
Yeah, the things I've seen from him are him actually smoking crack on YouTube videos, just live. There's actual videos of it. You just look it up.
Yeah, that's just all stuff that was on his laptop.
Yeah.
But the media said it was Russian disinformation.
Yeah, right. And like the more the media just refuses to cover it, like the more shady it gets, right?
Yes.
So back to Mr. Putin.
One thing I find interesting with the Ukraine and Russia is that back when Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, and the problem is that Russia wouldn't declare war on them and go to them.
Yeah.
They still did. So this is why I think nukes are very, very important to have, because it's really a huge deterrent.
Yep.
Kind of stops all the stuff.
It is.
So what you're saying is if you give up your weapons for peace, that doesn't pan out well.
Well, as Sun Tzu also said, if you want peace, prepare for war. If you want war, prepare for peace. Like all the elite like to talk about, we're going to just unilaterally disarm all our nuclear weapons and get rid of them. Or you look at how they concentrate power, and then what we were talking about earlier about how the communists tend to work with the Islamists, and the communists are concentrating power in all these institutions, and then also importing a lot of the Islamists and their ideology. You could see a time in the future where they could take over different parts, especially if you look at what's going on in Europe with the fact that they've had all this immigration in the last few years, that people have different culture, different values, and who openly say their goal is to outbreed the native population and eventually take over.
Yeah, and even stateside, you can see a lot of probably Chinese spies in these higher education institutions. Just busting people on Harvard, and this professor was actually getting paid by the government of China. It's
money cuts a lot of ties.
I think your point was just not just see it from the narrative that we're getting.
I think a big part of it too for Putin is regaining that former glory of Russia. That's getting their former territory and having a win, because throughout his thing, Russia's always come deteriorating. They're having a huge population crisis. They're the biggest country on the planet. They have 100 million people. And it's only getting worse and worse. Huge alcohol problems too. They lead the world in alcoholism deaths. That's most of ex-Soviet territory, but So I think it's trying to get something to get everyone going, something good for them, like a win for them, essentially.
Well, people don't seem to be too happy about
No,
it.
they don't. They're kind of arrested for peacefully protesting, like other countries.
I think
So-
desperate times call for desperate measures. I think what he's doing is a desperate move. So there's definitely the perspective that he's acting out of desperation, trying to protect his country. You know?
Yeah, because he only
Now, I'm
forces
not
it to get
saying-
weaker.
Right. And I'm not saying that I'm not justifying it. I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah, like for me personally, there's so much information. Like you simultaneously have to take it all in, and then be open that it's propaganda or it's not real. It's impossible to figure out what it actually is.
Well,
right now.
look at what happened in Canada with the truckers.
Yeah.
There were the Canadian government's own news agency was showing the very few interviews that they could find of people who didn't like the truckers and thought the truckers were a problem, and that's what they put up. They didn't put up the other, however, dozens of people, or the higher percentage of people that they interviewed that were saying, yeah, we this mask mandate and vaccine mandate and passport mandate we're enough of this and we're over it. They filtered all that stuff out, and they showed the very few people that they could find that were against the protesters, and those are the ones that they put up on the news. So
All media is
the
narrative.
media has shown to be deceptive at least. So now observing that, right, that was just a week or two ago. So now we see what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. So now I'm like, well, hey, so now is the media all of a sudden telling the truth? Or is this just as much whitewashed as what they showed 3 days ago with what was going on with the truckers in Canada? So I've actually, which has been a little bit liberating for me, because now it's so much easier to just assume that they're pushing a narrative and a perspective. So now I automatically, as a result of that, ask myself, let's view it from all these other perspectives that normally I might not have done.
Yeah, because you think about it right now, right? I'm like, you know what? What if like Putin actually like is justified in what he's doing? I would get destroyed, right? But if you just turn it over to Canada, that's probably what a lot of Canadians were. That's the information they were fed, and like maybe they actually thought, the truckers were like in the wrong, and there were these like white supremacist fringe minority, whatever, right? Because like if that's the information you're being fed, and the environment around you makes it where if you don't agree with that, you're like this.
You're ostracized,
shamed.
shamed.
You're ostracized for like supporting the villain. You could totally go wrong with it. Because right now, like, you imagine if I'm like, I send out like an Instagram post. You know what? Maybe Putin has a point.
They just be
I would
immediately
get canceled.
Yeah.
I'll get canceled.
Oh,
right?
you're a tyrant. You stand with the.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
But it's a perspective.
yeah, but the more it's like this, like the more I'm like listen, like it looks bad, and there might be something else, right? Let's keep an open mind. But I mean, war is never a good thing, right? So I was in Afghanistan in 2010. It's different parts of the country. Some parts were not as bad off as others, but it is. There is so much like pain and suffering and long-term consequences, it should not have to come to that.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of steps that could have been like taken before it comes to that, and by the time it gets there, if war is inevitable, it's a very sad thing, and it always could have been prevented.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
There's a very powerful quote. I don't remember who it's by, but it's like, I don't know who's profiting from the war, but I know who's paying the price. And he was referring to all the civilians, all the mothers who lost their sons, all the daughters and sons that lost their fathers, just the community losing their people. It's a horrible thing. It's just all the pain and misery. So
yeah, like PTSD is a real thing, right? It's and that's something where even people come out of it, whatever they experience, that's something that's going to be passed on. So.
What really scares me about this is if it goes nuclear, because we would literally just get wiped out. It would be a cataclysm we haven't seen since the end of the last ice age. We'd get it back into the stone. We'd lose so much information. All our info would go down. Imagine we don't all have our phones nowadays. How many people can't survive without going to the grocery store? Because that's the thing. That's what happened. All the supply chains would go down. There's that nuclear winter. So crops, we'd lose so much crops because there's so much dust in the air. Most people would be dead.
That's like one of the things where
well, that went dark quick.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
But that's what you just never want to. You just never want to get to that point because you might end up like get into a position where you inadvertently spring or set something out that's way larger. Like just because there's like there's some like road rage incident thing going on, you're not going to get out of your car or walk up and just start kicking the other person.
Well, you know what I actually saw?
You have no idea what's going to end up happening.
There was a video about some road rage thing. So this person starts going around this car, and when the person goes around the car, the driver pulls out a gun, starts firing from his car. Yeah. Shoots out his own window, shoots at them. Over just a little stupid thing like some honking on the street.
And so you already know the end result. Let's just say, again, you went somewhere dark, right? But the end result is like freaking nuclear war. Was the Ukraine thing ever worth it? It's not. Right? Like it's,
Putin's been threatening. There was a video where he was talking the other day. He was threatening.
Yeah, he didn't say it, but he was implying nukes.
Yeah, that's the video. That's what scared me.
He's doing the crazy Ivan. Anybody that challenges him, obviously NATO, United States, anybody.
Yeah, like
anybody that interferes with him taking over Ukraine or attacking his forces will, in essence, will use a full nuclear strike.
Yeah, they'll be met with.
He said that.
Yeah.
No, he says they'll be met with consequences that is more serious than they ever imagined.
Something like that the world has ever seen.
That's kind of
it looks like
kind of Trumpian language because Trump was the first one to get out there and talk like that. The kind of like he was Kim Jong-un. He says, "I have a much bigger red button, and mine actually works."
Oh, that was awesome.
Oh, it's just not worth it.
So the different demands are. They want Putin's, these are his ultimatums. He says he wants to recognize Crimea as Russian. He wants any rejection of NATO accession, meaning they're not going to join NATO. No weapons supplies from the West. That means all the javelins and all the other things that we've
already given them.
Yeah, that we won't be able to do that anymore. And then these two regions. So we've got Luhansk and Donetsk. Gain territory that the regions had pre-2014. What happened in 2014? I can't remember.
That's when they took Crimea, the peninsula, the Crimean Peninsula.
Yeah, so like I see this, and I see someone that wants Ukraine to basically remain neutral and be a buffer state.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is not, we want to capture Ukraine and like expand the Russian Empire, like what people are saying.
Yeah.
It's like the direction it's going is here, and he's asking for this so that they end up somewhere in the middle.
I don't think he's asking for.
I mean, yeah, because NATO's just been slowly encroaching on them.
His goal is to destroy their military and then leave them toothless, basically, so they can't ever threaten Russia again. But what's the other argument is what's to stop him from coming in later, or just saying once he's disarmed everybody, say, hey, you know what, we're not going to leave. Then they'll get an insurgency, obviously, but
it's very draining when you're occupying a foreign territory that's not yours.
Yeah, and the people don't seem to want them there.
We learned that in the U.S. Russia learned that in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
right. So like, I mean, we don't really know what's going on in his head, but it's not something that if he's as strategic as we make him out to be, he's not going to want to like occupy foreign territories and just start draining the country's resources.
Yeah, they don't have enough. Different analysts were saying it doesn't have enough troops to hold the country for an extended period of time.
Yeah, because once you have to stay there, then you have to set up a supply chain, logistics, and everything, and then it's also just really expensive. Like with at least on the U.S. side, all the contractors that we had to pay, like it just starts wearing out on wearing out the economy.
Yeah. So you're saying he really doesn't want the place. He just doesn't want the place going to NATO.
Well, yeah, just based on that, right? He wants it to not be in NATO. He doesn't want any military capabilities in there. He wants to
Right.
be a neutral buffer state, right? Which is actually pretty consistent
So-
with what he's saying he wants.
So, what has changed in Ukraine in the last 6 months
They got
that,
closer to
that
the
he's
West.
moving forward?
Closer to the West.
So what is
Like,
this,
why is he
2018?
why is he doing this now and not 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago or further?
Well, they've also been talking about joining the European
Yeah.
Union.
That's why.
So it's still moving into the orbit of the Western oligarchs or the elite, the Klaus Schwabs. So
I mean,
Putin says he's not going to stop until Ukraine surrenders. And then he also suggested that it would include the end of Ukraine's current government, which he described as a band of drug addicts and neo-Nazis who hold up in Kiev and taking the entire Ukrainian people hostage.
I mean,
I do know their government's pretty corrupt, though.
it is, right? Like and that's
so
the
is
thing.
Russia stuff.
Right now, like it's like this Ukrainian government, and like they're just like these like poor, like no, that's a corrupt, pretty bad government.
Yeah.
You know, like but right now it's like George Floyd became a martyr. It's all of a sudden became like some saint who did all this good in the world. Like, you know, like wasn't a good dude. He shouldn't have died, but you don't have to change the narrative on him, make him out to be this like positive role model.
Well, Putin, I remember reading this. He said in other remarks hours later that he asked the Ukrainian military to overthrow Zelensky, who is Jewish, but he called him a neo-Nazi, even though the guy's Jewish.
Yeah.
Jennifer Griffin. This came from Jennifer Griffin of Fox News. She said the State Department orders all U.S. officials to cease all contacts with Russian officials unless explicitly approved and relevant to managing the current crisis. This move is not at all routine, a mechanism used to narrow channels of communication during crisis reports. So where are the Chinese in all this? And so this was from the New York Times. Americans presented Chinese officials with intelligence on Russia's troop buildup in hopes that President Xi Jinping would step in, but were repeatedly rebuffed. And this was interesting. After a diplomatic exchange in December, U.S. officials got intelligence showing that Beijing had taken that intelligence and shared it with Moscow, telling the Russians that the United States was trying to sow discord and that would not try to impede Russian plans and actions.
Man, if that's true, that's just embarrassing. Like it's just completely not being able to read the room. You know?
Well, the thing with China too is I think they might take this as an opportunity to invade Taiwan, because if the West is so distracted with Russia and all that stuff, it's prime time. But I don't think they're going to invade full-on man invasion. I think it's maybe just kind of like through that subversion. They just take it over like Hong Kong. I think what you're saying that earlier. I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, like it's one thing to like send troops in, you know, I don't know.
I think they just rather do it over time because it's more clean. They don't have to fight as much as resistance.
I think the fear of like an invasion in Taiwan is a lot more than what's more likely. You know, I'm not saying it's impossible, but to send troops into Taiwan, like that's very aggressive. The Chinese government hasn't done that in a long time.
Yeah.
So the West, I know, what was that? I think Biden just asked for $3.5 billion more in aid for them, and then he was Secretary Austin authorized. I think it was $350 million more. I assume it was sending, or I read that meant we were sending more Javelin missiles. So you got Turkey, the Czech Republic, Estonia. They've all supplied military aid.
I mean, I haven't checked tonight, but it's kind of weird that there's these like reports of like actual like encounters, and I haven't seen any like actual videos, which you would expect to see.
Yeah, I think with the Netherlands, it was just I saw earlier today. They were giving them, I think it was the Netherlands. It was one of those countries over there, the Nordic countries, and they gave them like 200 Stinger anti-aircraft or missiles to shoot down planes and helicopters and stuff, which we had given those to the Northern Alliance and Bin Laden back in the 90s, and they decimated the Russians and shot a lot of helicopters and planes down.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so much information. It's hard to figure out what's actually going on.
Yeah, they're putting sanctions on everybody, but they're allowing them, because everybody in Europe is buying oil and gas from them, allowing the cash to keep flowing for that.
Yeah, so for this, to me personally, the thing that's the most interesting is actually what's going on with the SWIFT system. So the SWIFT system is it was created in the 70s, right? And it's how we wire money internationally. And for the most part, the U.S. has been controlling that. And now, at least as of tonight, it seems like they're willing to kick Russia out of the SWIFT system. But the SWIFT system it's slow. There's a 6% failure rate. So basically, 6% of the time you try to wire money internationally, it'll end up getting lost and eventually find its way back, and you have to send it again, right? And it's almost like the government's still trying to use fax machines. So if they actually do kick Russia out, there's a lot of workarounds that are way more superior and way faster. And the only reason why I think we haven't upgraded is because the U.S. has been in control and they actually want to relinquish that, right? So there's a couple of cryptocurrency solutions, but even if you want to go just more digital solutions that are available, it's already available. And so from a financial standpoint, that is actually huge that they're openly talking about kicking Russia out, because you can actually see essentially those China and Russia and then whatever countries they could get to go along with them start breaking off from SWIFT and form their own system. And then our whole monetary system will have to evolve, because once you have enough people that aren't dependent on the dollar as the reserve currency of the world, there's a lot of things that can happen, and it's gonna throw all of this stuff into a tornado.
Decentralization is the way to go.
Yeah, at that point, then it's almost like who can actually make the currency more secure, right? So one of the most powerful ways you can secure your currency is you back it with something, right? So you can go to gold backing. There's something called SDR, special drawing rights. I think we talked about it before, right? It could be they could update whatever's in the SDRs and then make that.
Yeah, SDRs usually the IMF is big on those.
Yes.
That's more concentrated power, and I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah, so it's actually way more likely to hurt the U.S. that we're kicking Russia out.
Life fills voids.
Yeah.
So if they create that void, then Russia's pretty crafty, right? They find something that's more efficient, then they're just going to
They have a bunch of gold. They have a bunch of
US.
oil. They're set up for the long run.
Yeah, they've got resources, and it's going to have consequences on the U.S. Right? If our country is short on oil.
Yeah, and I mean, just even the gold part, right? Our gold supposedly in Fort Knox, it hasn't been audited in many, many decades. We don't even know how much gold we actually have. But if it actually starts moving towards gold as what people value as money.
Money is a medium of financial exchange and a store of financial value. So gold, silver, even fine art or real estate could, they're obviously not easy to convert or exchange, but anything that fits that definition, that's why crypto fits.
Yeah, it has to be it'll have to be something that there can be enough agreement worldwide. So the value of the money will be pegged based on that. It could be a basket of currencies. It could be gold, silver, and some other stuff too. But if the dollar isn't it, something else has to fill its place.
Yeah.
Right. And the SWIFT in Russia going off the SWIFT system, and if other countries join them, is a huge step towards that.
And that might be a great opportunity for Russia anyway, because doesn't Russia get shafted? But the fact that the U.S. dollar
every country
is the base for everything, so the U.S. can print more money.
Yeah, they have so much control.
prop up our own economy,
Yeah.
even though it's not doing well, just because we're the basis, we're the gold standard. The U.S. is the gold standard.
Well, the debt around the world is denominated in U.S. dollars, right? And then you call it like the petrodollar. So like oil right now, like through the Middle East, you have to actually buy it in U.S. dollars. So
there's a monopoly on
it.
value, on currency value.
Yeah.
And the U.S. has the ability to control its own value, but Russia and all the other countries do not have the ability to control the value of their currency like the U.S. does, or even close to it.
Yeah, like they're more at the effect of, right? And then like, I've heard this said a lot, like the U.S. military is actually just a tool of the government to enforce the dollar as a reserve currency of the world. That's actually why we're going around the world doing what we're doing. So
that's a perspective.
It's enforcing the policies of the elite, the oligarchs, the trust fund babies.
So it's the same thing as the police protecting the politicians and not the people in Canada. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So we're sending our young people overseas to supposedly fight this war when the reality is we're just protecting the special interests of the elite.
We're paying the price. That's kind of what I was tying to the quote earlier. Like who's getting paid from it, who's profiting from it, and
we don't know who's profiting, but we know who's paying the price.
Yeah, we're the cannon fodder.
All the civilian.
Wow.
Yeah, but
nothing personal. It's just business.
Yeah, but what's cool is you can actually see it, right? Like, so let's just say, like you talk about the elite and stuff. Do you think they actually wanted the internet to become a thing and then widely available? Of course not, right? But for some reason, it was allowed to happen, and then once it was allowed to happen, then it started like taking off, and then now they can't control information the way they could before.
I think maybe why it happened was because it was just so obscure they weren't paying attention. There's just other things they were paying attention to. Because they weren't actively developing.
Slow to react to that.
Yeah, and then now, like, people think they own crypto because they had some Dogecoin. So now, if you try to ban it, enough people would resist that, and you actually probably would speed up the adoption.
Yeah.
Right, like this whole like SWIFT thing is actually really interesting. Like that's actually a really big thing, and it's actually just like a footnote for most people. So
short term it'll be painful, but long term it'll be a good
SWIFT?
thing. If they boot Russia out of it. So then Russia is going to have to
be painful for Russia. I don't even think it'll be painful short term for Russia.
Yeah, why would it be? Because they don't have control over the value of the currency anyway.
Like I think they're already set up to move on to something better.
You think the Russian government could announce that they'll accept Bitcoin or crypto, kind of like Maduro did?
They actually were already passing something along those lines as of like 3 weeks ago. So like the Russian central bank, which I talked about earlier, how Putin actually is like the only like leader that is holding off the central bank in his own country. Russian central bank says, we think Bitcoin should be banned. And then like the next week, like in the Russian like Congress or whatever their version of it is, like they're passing like a bill to accept crypto as legal tender, right? So they're already doing it. Like,
so they did pass that bill in Russia?
They were trying to get it passed. I don't know if it's passed yet, but that was like 3 weeks ago.
It's it's easy to use.
Yeah, once they moved to that, because like in Venezuela, right? They were going through hyperinflation. So they try to issue a new currency, like this new one is equal to like 1 million of the old one. That one hyperinflated away. Then they try to issue a cryptocurrency, but it's not really a cryptocurrency. And this is in like 2016. And like Trump, 2016 or 2017, Trump was one of the first ones that says, we will not recognize that. Nobody wanted to use his cryptocurrency. So in Venezuela, people ended up using the US dollar and euros, right? That's the unofficial currency that's being used there. And you can just see like when people lose trust or faith in the money, they'll end up finding something that they can agree on to trade in.
Yeah, on that smaller level.
So if it's not the US dollar, what is it going to be? Like that'll be really interesting.
Crypto. So when you say crypto,
if it goes nuclear, we'll have bottle caps
that they're leaning towards.
So
is it going to be right? So Bitcoin or Dogecoin or Dash.
No, it won't be Dash. Sorry. So if it's to replace the SWIFT system, most likely choice is XRP. And there's a lot of evidence of central banks around the world testing their digital currency on the XRP blockchain. And XLM is something similar, but like by far the top most likely choice would be XRP.
Because of its ease, it's for usage.
Yeah.
Or...
So like if you think about like the idea is like right now, if you wanted the Mexican peso and the Japanese yen, right? Like when you wire it, it'll go to something called a Nostro Vostro account. So basically they have both. So I'm going to send the Japanese yen over, then that institution is going to send the Mexican peso to Mexico, right? And it's using the SWIFT system to communicate. So one, you have a lot of money just locked up waiting to do that, and it takes a long time, right? Like XRP is designed to be the bridge currency. So it's actually going to be, everything will be switched to XRP, which will be switched to something else. The transaction time is like about 3 seconds. The transaction cost is less than a penny for like $1 million.
And does it lose 6% of the transactions?
No, it's secure because it's not centralized, and it's just a way better solution, right? So and it's actually, it doesn't favor any country because no country controls it. So my actual fear, because I'm pretty high on XRP, is that Russia actually in the Russian central bank has tested their digital currency on the XRP ledger before. My fear is that Russia, say they decide to go the cryptocurrency route and they decide to use XRP, right? And then somehow like the US policymakers use that as an excuse to go after crypto or even ban like XRP as if like it's doing something wrong. It's just a software and it's a system that's just superior to what we have now.
Well, if they get rid of XRP, then Russia will just use a different one.
Well, no. They use it and then we try to ban it here. So like rather than adopting like a superior technology, we actually don't use it. Like you can't actually ban, you can't actually get rid of the XRP ledger because it's like a decentralized blockchain.
But we just won't accept it.
Yeah, we might actually like ban, like try to use that as an excuse to go after crypto or.
Yeah, you don't have your crypto on the exchanges. You have them on your own. You have them on your own devices. And
right,
they
so
can't
like,
touch it because then you can send it anywhere. If you have the other person's address, you just send it right to their address. There's no government or banking or anything that gets in. There's no middleman.
Yeah, and if you just think about it, right? Like up until like fairly recently in our history, like how much money you have and where your money is your own business, right? And then like as we kind of got into the digital age, like somehow it's become like they're justifying why it's okay for them to track your transactions. So like if it's over $600, we get to track it. You know, if you have this much money in your bank account, we have to know. And like it's to prevent illegal or illicit activities, right? Like
gotta keep you safe.
And we just and like it's for your own good, and we just buy and we just allow it over and over. Yeah, right. Like since when is like a person's like personal property and how much money they have the business of the government? Like why do they get to actually track that and then like somehow make it wrong for you?
So then they know how much to take.
Plato said the indifference to public affair, or the consequences of being indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. I think that was Plato, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds about right. But like, and like, it's like we're okay with the government somehow having that kind of like control over us, like in that area, right? It should be like a.
Most people don't want responsibility for their lives, and they like the idea of a government handout, a government telling them what to do, going to government schools, living their little cookie cutter life. Yeah,
and then the other thing, I mean, I haven't been in the military for almost 10 years now, right? So like, I don't know what's actually being briefed and like what information is being collected. But again, this is still the most likely outcome. Is there's going to be posturing on both sides. There might be some skirmishes. You're not going to see something like crazy. And then they'll end up coming to some kind of like settlement, right? That's most likely where it's going to go.
Putin and Zelensky?
Yeah, and then it's actually Putin and like the powers in the West that are backing Ukraine, right? And it'll
Yeah,
you know,
I saw some reports that was saying that like Russia's running out of money, weapons, resources. Like they had a finite number of missiles, and they wouldn't be able to sustain. And then some of the things that they use are not even made in Russia, or the components that are.
yeah.
And then those countries that make those components and those weapons won't send Russia any more of that stuff. And they don't have the stockpile. And so they've been talking about how if Kiev can hold off, this was from with the Daily Mail, if Kiev can hold off for 10 days, the Kremlin may have to enter negotiations because they just can't sustain a long war.
Yeah, like even if they have this stuff, once you're there, like sustaining is a completely different story than just moving jets or like tanks to the border and then doing whatever in that short amount of time.
Yeah.
It's like, I could tell you, at least as of 10 years ago, there's no other country in the world that could do that.
Especially if it gets to springtime too, because it gets too muddy there. They can't sustain an offensive. They're just gonna get bogged down.
Yeah.
But the thing is, all the stuff like we saw with the Ghost to Kiev fighter pilot, is like we were talking about earlier. It's just through the fog of war. It's so hard to figure out what's actually happening and not. And then, like, you see the things we were talking about. Some of the things are from pictures from years ago.
Yeah, it's like
there were some combat things.
Yeah.
And it was a video game. It's like somebody took like a Call of Duty.
full body armor, and it was from 2016.
Yeah.
But it was like the picture showing how he's staying and fighting with the troops, right?
Yeah.
Like at the very least, it's very lazy to use that picture without checking it first.
It was kind of like
Most people don't check, though.
the Iranians. If you ever saw their missile launches, and they just basically duplicated it, and so they had people on the internet that analyzed that, and they could see that
it's the same four missiles launching over and over. Yeah,
it was like one launch, and they just duplicated it. It made like so it showed they were like shooting off dozens of missiles, ICBM type things.
Yeah, which makes you think, right? Because like you see, like some of these like newer movies. So like the actor or actress that was in it actually like died halfway through. Then they just use CGI to finish the rest of it. Like if they could do that in a movie, how can you even really trust any like?
Oh, the deep fakes. That's what's scary.
Like, how do you really know? Right? Like I'm
it's
not.
Just where's all the video though of all? If there's people around with their cell phones and you got 4K cell phones, why is there almost no footage of anything coming out of it?
Actual like engagements? Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. It's only like those little shittily shot videos on people's phone that don't know how to hold the camera right, you know? That's the only stuff really coming out.
Because even I remember you guys saw that video like the bombing in Lebanon. I think it was last year. Or was it the year before? It was crazy. It was like someone, and you could just see like
where the port there was some storage. Of,
and
I can't remember what it was, but
right,
and it took out massive area.
Yeah, or like someone even captured that, and you're telling me there's nothing so far of like some engagement going on in Ukraine, you know, and supposedly this boat was sunk, or like this plane was like shot down, and like 200 Russian troops were taken as prisoners. Like there's nothing.
If someone had a cell phone there,
like
they
there's like videos
of
satellite drone footage as well.
Yeah, there's videos of like
Ukrainian
Ukrainian soldiers like taking selfies. We're not saying so. Take a video of themselves, like supposedly like sending it to their parents and stuff. You know, like they have their phone on, they have internet. Elon Musk just announced earlier today that Starlink is up in Ukraine, so they have access to internet there. So yeah, it's weird.
Cool. Well, that's about the end of all the bullet points.